Welcome everyone to this evening, to Building Peace, as we're calling this session. My name is Ken Ogasawara, and I currently serve with MCC in Ontario as part of the communications team. But I should note that my first role with MCC started as a wee lad, as a parking lot attendant at the New Hamburg Relief Sale, and then a little later I did the SALT program in Uganda, which is which was 20 years ago this year, which is distressing to think about. Before we get too far into this evening, I want to start with a land acknowledgement. And I also want to recognize that although this land acknowledgement that I'm about to read focuses on the Indigenous peoples of Ontario, MCC works all over the world, and there are Indigenous peoples in every land. And just want to recognize that the sentiments expressed here apply across the world. So we begin this evening's session by acknowledging and honoring the original people from all the nations represented in this land we now call Ontario. We acknowledge the impact of colonialism on the land, the language, the culture, and knowledge of all Indigenous peoples. We also recognize the contributions Indigenous peoples have made in shaping and strengthening communities across Ontario. We are grateful for the opportunity to reaffirm our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our lives and in our work. I just have a few reminders, a few little Zoom housekeeping items. If you haven't already, please mute yourself just so there's minimal background chatter. And if you have any questions as the evening progresses, please write them in the chat, and we'll be collecting those, and we'll have a chance to answer some of those questions at the end of the presentation. So let's just get right to it. I want to introduce to you our guests. Rebecca Burkholder and Blaine Derstine are the co-area directors for Central, Southern, and Northeast Asia from Mennonite Central Committee. In that role, they support MCC reps in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, as well as North and South Korea. Rebecca grew up in Goshen, Indiana, and holds a law degree from Georgetown University Law Center. Blaine grew up in Harleysville, Pennsylvania, and holds a master's degree in international economics from Catholic University. Rebecca and Blaine are based in MCC's Asia regional office in Chiang Mai, Thailand, which is, I assume, much balmier than we're getting here, temperature-wise, and I'm envious. Kaitlyn and Luke Jantzi, many of you will be familiar with these two. They are serving as co-MCC country reps to Nepal. Kaitlyn is also assisting with mental health activities and initiatives for the Asia region. Kaitlyn has a Bachelor of Education and a Master of Social Work degrees. Luke has a Bachelor of Business Administration and a postgraduate Chartered Professional Accounting designation. And Kaitlyn and Luke live in Kathmandu, Nepal, with their 2 young children. And so I think we'll just start with Luke and Kaitlyn. How are you guys doing? Thanks for starting your day extra early for us. We recognize that this is a nice, convenient time for us here in Ontario, but what time is it there for you guys?
It is now 5:50 a.m. So almost 6.
I never want to see that time of day. Thank you guys for doing this for us. You two come from KW, where I think a lot of our guests tonight are tuning in from or have connections here. So you're kind of playing to a home crowd. You both served in South Sudan with MCC in 2010 and 2012. And that was a long time ago now that I think about it. And Luke, I remember we had connected, our time overlapped a little bit on the board. I served very briefly on the MCC Ontario board, and you were the treasurer. And I remember just, you had a heavy load, that's a lot of work. And you had a lot of number crunching to go through. And I will say that you have, even though that sort of stuff is not my forte, nor my, I'll be honest, I'm not super passionate about budget and stuff, but your presentations held my attention, which is something significant. So I appreciate your work there. And Kaitlyn, well, I knew your name really before I knew you, because you were friends with my sister at Rockway, and so it's kind of cool to connect with you later on through MCC. So again, yeah, just thanks for coming out here. And I'll start with an easy question, which is, you guys moved to Nepal in the middle of the pandemic, like just months ago. And for myself personally, as a parent of 2 young kids, I think roughly the same age as your 2 kids, I feel like some days it feels like we're never going to get out of the house even, much less move across the world. So how did you do it? How did you get to that place?
Yeah, I mean, it's good because when you arrive, you're in quarantine, so you also don't have to leave the house. Two weeks of just staying in the house was perfect. But yeah, there are lots of reasons that we come. First of all, it should be noted that we committed before the pandemic was a thing. So had we known, who knows whether we would have made the same decisions, but we followed through on our commitment. And I think to a few reasons for that. One, and maybe the biggest one, is that the work of MCC is just so well aligned with who we are, who we want to be, how we see the world, what our faith perspective is on the world. And we just find that when you're working for an organization like that, when the work aligns so well with who you want to be and what you want to do, it's more of a vocation than a job. And it just makes a huge difference in terms of the energy that you have and the passion that you have for that work. For instance, at 10 to 6 in the morning, here we are, and we're very happy to be here and thankful to all the people who have come out. Those of you who are friends and family of ours, and many donors on the call, just thankful that we can be here and be a part of this process, even though it's still dark outside. And the other thing that I'll mention is that we have always felt like it is good to broaden our worldview, to travel around to different places, to see different people and different ways of being in the world. There are different ways of being in the world than the ones that we see in our little bubble in Kitchener. So we're happy and excited for that adventure, for the chance to travel. And now that you mentioned we have kids, it's also important for us that our kids see that too, that they also broaden their horizons and see different ways to be.
Yeah, and I think just a little bit more to that, like, it's actually never probably an easy time to move abroad with little kids. And so, the pandemic, it made it more complicated, but it didn't make it, I think it would have always been challenging to do this. But that said, we were kind of leaving from June. We didn't arrive until October. So we were in temporary housing that our church provided, which we were so grateful for. But by the time we actually got here, we were just so grateful to be here, to be landing and find a place that we know that we're going to be home. I have a photo of the MCC Nepal team too, and they are just fantastic. This is from our Christmas party. This is at the office, and just the most welcoming, kind, competent, amazing people to work with. So that's also made the transition so much easier, that we can kind of enter this role and into a community of really wonderful people doing great work.
That's amazing. Thanks so much. And man, what a view that is. That's an incredible, just place to have a meeting. I would love meetings a lot more if we had that view. Let me switch gears. Blaine and Rebecca, let me introduce you as well and just have a quick chat. You have been area directors for, and this is a mouthful, but Central, Southern, and Northeast Asia for 5 years now. And I understand you've also you've extended that an extra year, which we appreciate. Could you tell us a bit about what motivated you to accept this assignment, and maybe share some of the highlights of the many different places that you visit in the course of your work?
Sure. Well, first of all, we also want to say that we're glad to be here this morning and glad all of you could join us. We're also grateful that Luke and Kaitlyn decided to come to Nepal, even in the midst of the pandemic and everything that entailed. So yeah, we are glad they can be part of our team and that we can be working together. So previously, we served with MCC in Bangladesh about 20 years ago with our young children who are about the age of Luke and Kaitlyn's children. And we found that experience to be very rewarding, not without its challenges, but in the end to be very rewarding for us personally and our family. And we always thought we might return to MCC and to Asia someday. And when this position opened up, it seemed like a good fit for both of us. And like Luke and Kaitlyn, we really view this as more than a job, as a vocation, as a way of life. We left our lives in North America to return to Asia, knowing that as area directors, we'd be traveling around the area, meeting with our partners, with our staff, with our projects, and really those collaborations fulfill and motivate us.
Yeah, we see serving in MCC as one way to live out our faith. We think of it as sort of like tithing our time to living out Christ's call to serve. We understand responding to the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself as a way to respond to the person that's standing beside you or to the person that's halfway around the world. And by joining MCC, you know, we are inspired by MCC's peace building emphasis. And now that we're here, we understand that almost everything we do in Asia is really with the mindset of building peace among communities. When we partner with communities to end hunger or provide education, access to clean water, ensure a livelihood, all along those different streams of helping people, we are also developing relationships among people. And so we're creating peace and loving our neighbor as ourselves halfway around the world. So
Thank you. Yeah.
So where do we like to visit?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
One of the things about Asia that we find is there's so much beauty, and we travel sort of a broad range of Asia. We get to see the villages perched on the side of the mountains of Nepal, to the miles and miles of green, newly planted rice on the delta of the Ganges in India and Bangladesh, which this picture is of. I especially, my excitement comes from visiting the people and being with the people when we visit, no matter where it is. But most of all, I enjoy meeting and learning from the people. I enjoy visiting farmers that we support and love seeing their excitement as they talk about their fields of rice or mustard greens or broccoli, and talking about these new varieties of vegetables they're growing. It's just good to see that and to experience the different people's joys from different places. In addition, many of the places that we would visit that are working especially with food security, they have kitchen gardens or small gardens on tiny little plots outside their house. And they grow a lot of different vegetables for their own consumption. And just seeing the pride that these parents have in taking this space and growing food for their families is really satisfying. And knowing that, you know, potentially before MCC was supporting them, they were not able to support their family. The other thing, for people who know me, one of the things that I really get a kick out of doing, and I do that here actually in Thailand, is I do composting. So I really get a lot of joy out of seeing all the different types of composting that our partners are doing with the village people.
And that is very true. He loves composting. And I would just add that I love visiting the markets across Asia, seeing the different fruits and the foods and the brightly colored textiles and all the different crafts. No two markets are the same in the end. And of all the places we visited, I'd have to just add that North Korea was very, very interesting just because it's a country not many people get to visit. And I found that it was a country with really very stark beauty, beautiful natural lakes and mountains and architecture in the main city that was quite striking.
Thank you, Rebecca and Blaine. It paints a great picture of sort of the variety and the diversity of the territory and the lands that you get to visit. It sounds amazing. Kaitlyn, let's jump back to you and sort of get into the work that you guys have, fairly recently gotten into. I guess you guys are still on a very much of a steep learning curve, but I know that Kaitlyn, as a social worker, you sort of bring a unique skill set to the area of mental health. And can you tell us a bit more about your work there, supporting and promoting mental health in Nepal?
Yeah, sure. So one thing I was really excited about when we were kind of interviewing and talking to Blaine and Rebecca was their enthusiasm for my enthusiasm for mental health work. So I've been I've done supported a couple of webinars for the whole of MCC international programs on resiliency in COVID and mental health in COVID. And then also I've had a chance to meet with the team from India, and I'm meeting with the Laos team to chat with them about their needs in terms of their staff needs, and then how they can support, how we MCC can support them better and kind of equip them in terms of mental health. I've also started doing a little bit of counseling with MCC service workers and national staff. So service workers are people who are serving outside of their home country. National staff are people who are living in their home country. And I've been really pleasantly surprised of people kind of taking me up on my offer of counseling, just to kind of further support people in the work that they're doing. It's hard to move to a new place, or it's just hard to be working and living in the midst of the pandemic. So to support people in that. In Nepal, we have a partner, a mental health partner named Koshish, and we have two great photos from them. I think that they are the only organization doing mental health work like this in Nepal. So like in Canada, stigma around mental illness still exists. In Nepal, people generally don't get any treatment until they're kind of at a crisis point, an acute mental moment of mental illness. So Koshish does this really great work. They have a transit home. They usually have about 50 women who were maybe on the streets or their families couldn't support them, who were in mental crisis. So they take them in, get them stable. They offer art therapy, vocational training, counseling, medication, anything that these women might need to stabilize them. And then they partner with their families back in their home communities so that they can reintegrate and be well when they go back. So it's a really cool project. I'm not going to tell you these women's names just to protect their anonymity. Usually with MCC, we like to give names, but in terms of this project, we just won't. But these are kind of great pictures you can see giving kind of human dignity back to women who have really, really been struggling.
That's amazing. Thank you, Kaitlyn. And that's really so great that you can bring your social worker qualifications and heart to that work. It's really great. And also makes me wonder, like, how I wonder when, and this is just amusing, we don't have to like answer this, but when mental health became a part of sort of the development and peace work, it's sort of, I love that it's integrated now, and how we realize the importance of that. And so it's really cool that, you can bring your social worker skills
to that. Musing. I think it was absent when we were in Sudan 2009 to 12, like that. I didn't see anything like that. So I don't know if that was Sudan versus Nepal, but it is right. Interesting.
Yeah, maybe more of a recent development. It's great anyway. Thank you. Luke, let's switch to you. I know that you just got back from a field visit where you visited some education and food security projects. So yeah, tell us about what you saw and what you learned there.
Yeah, we had a bit of a whirlwind tour, 2 or 3 days of touring around to a whole set of different partners that we work with down near Bharatnagar, which is the second biggest city in Nepal. So we have a few pictures from that, and I'll quickly go through them. Here on the screen, you see pictures of a couple of set of children who were at one of the schools that we're working with. Their names from left to right are Renuka, Jitmaya, Asma, Ayus, Samir, Sabine, and Vipana. And they're up on the screen because, and this is a bit of a cliche, but you hear about children walking forever to get to and from school. These children, let's confirm it still happens. They walk an hour and a half from their village to get to this school every day. That's one way, an hour and a half there, an hour and a half home. And you can't really see it in the background there, but that in the fog up there, that's hills. That's not just the air up there. They're walking up that hill on the way home. They call it a hill. It would be a mountain in southwestern Ontario. So yeah, this is hard walking each way. We also saw a number of farmers who are working to grow, as Blaine and Rebecca mentioned. Most farmers are working in like staple crops, so rice, maize, that sort of thing. We've done some work training some farmers in vegetable production, which gives them more income for the same area and also broadens their diet, makes it a healthier diet. And then I think we have a picture as well of a couple of people in front of a fish farm. Yeah, so you can see in the background a little pond there. This is starting again from left to right. The child who's, I think he was 6 years old, is Rohit. And Daneshwar is the man who's pointing at the camera beside him there. That is the child's grandfather, and he was just so proud to get him into a picture in front of the fish farm here and also to have him meet us. Myself and Rohit, there was a word used and I don't remember it, but we are now forever friends, Rohit and I. So every time we see each other, we will still be friends. And then the other gentleman there is Dapla. And so I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this is a fish farm where they are able to raise fish locally, fish that is better than the fish that's being trucked in from India, both in terms of the taste of it and in terms of the environmental impact. And it's also generating income for these farmers. And then a few other things. We also are supporting scholarships down in that area, scholarships for individuals to go to do trainings. And they're kind of trainings where they can choose themselves where they want to get into. So the two that I saw was a young gentleman who had learned how to do cell phone repair and now has started up a small business doing cell phone repair and other vending. And then also a community medical assistant, which is somewhat similar to a pharmacist here. So he had opened up a pharmacy and was offering medications to the community. So a whole set of things, lots of good work.
Here we go. I muted myself successfully. Yeah, those whirlwind tours are must be just quite overwhelming as you try to keep track of like, okay, who are these partners and where are these projects coming from? I want to jump back to the education piece. Kaitlyn, you had mentioned something interesting about kind of the differences or the perceptions around like local education in the village versus, you know, urban education, like in the city. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So those kiddos that photo, there was also, we were talking to our kids about how these kids walk an hour and a half to get to school. They really want to go to school because one of them was 6, right? Which Leo is.
Yeah, the children in the photo were from the older grades because they were the ones who were there when we visited. They were splitting it up because of COVID, but there was a younger set that had been there in the morning. So from the younger grades down as low as 6 who were also walking from the same area.
Anyway, and so there is a perception in many rural areas that the education just isn't, a perception, maybe a reality, that the education isn't as good as what you could get for your child in the cities. And so a lot of families are uprooting themselves and moving to the cities where they don't have access to their regular ways of living, their communities, all of these sorts of things, because they want what's best for their children, which we can understand. So one of the things that one of our partners is doing is working on child-friendly pedagogy, training the teachers in how to move beyond like rote training, which I think some folks who went to school a long time ago probably experienced that in Ontario also, but moving towards more play-based, engaging, the kind of school that, you know, most educational research would now say is kind of best for kids. And so supporting, our partners are supporting that. And these kids, you said that they had like real connections with their teachers, like they're really enthusiastic to walk this far to school because they're actually getting really good education. And then families feel more able to stay in their communities where they would like to stay because they feel confident that their kids are able to get the education that they deserve.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of a site visit, is that you can see that warmth that Kaitlyn was talking about. You can't get that from a report. And so to be there and to see the kids laughing and joking with their head teacher, that's not the kind of relationship that is often there between children and their head teacher here. So you could see that it was actually working.
Right. So interesting. Yeah, I remember in Uganda where my salt position was as an elementary school teacher, which was interesting, but it was a lot of rote and a lot of, that style, which I hadn't experienced before. And you know what, for that matter, when I taught in Japan as well, it was a lot of that as well. And I don't know if this was for English, of course, like when teaching English, their second language or third language, whatever, but there was a lot of rote, and it's interesting to see that shift toward more like child-friendly, like play-based stuff. And yeah, that's cool. Luke, real quick, you'd mentioned that fish farm. Can you tell us a little bit more? Do you have a little more to share about that one, sort of the nuts and bolts of how that works? Or did we want to talk about, there's another question I had, which is sort of about, you know, why these communities in particular? You know, there's the country's vast, there's lots of places. So you can take a shot at either one of those questions. I've got lots of questions, but.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, very quickly, the groups that we're targeting here down in Biratnagar are very marginalized people groups. So they come from, people might know them as either the Dalits or the untouchables, the caste system. Those terms are not in favor here anymore. So I mention them only because people might understand them. They're generally prefer to be referred to as just marginalized people. But the caste system is still very strong here. It's been outlawed since 1962, but only officially in 2011 was there clear laws stating that you can't discriminate against these lowest caste groups. And that's only 10 years ago. So it takes a lot longer than that for a system that's been in place that deeply ingrained into society to fade away. So these are people who don't have a lot of access to land or income earning opportunities. Often, if they are looking for income, they are choosing to go overseas to do that. So they will work in Gulf states or even across the border in India. And there they don't have power or family. So they end up in positions where they're doing dangerous work, a lot of human rights violations. So a lot of our work is working on targeting local income opportunities so that people can stay in their local communities and work and be part of their families still. And in terms of the fish pond, that fish pond is a great story of coordinating with local government officials. The government owns the pond, but they help to maintain it for a very low fee and allow people to raise these fish. So they're raising thousands and thousands of kilograms of fish on a day-to-day basis. They do it two rounds per year. So it generates income, and it also is producing fish that is preferred in the market to that Indian fish. We're saving on trucking costs, we're saving on chemical intensive processes. So it's kind of an economic and an ecological win for everybody who's involved in it. And there's lots of plans. These guys have so many plans. They want to have fruit trees around the edge of this place to prevent erosion. They want ducks on the pond because then they can raise and sell ducks. And they also, while they're paddling around, can aerate the water and make the fish healthier too. Just so many different opportunities with this project. And I'll leave it at that for now, but there's lots more to say on it.
That is super exciting. I read a bit about sort of the ecosystem of certain projects and how they can complement each other and sort of produce more business, really complementary businesses that kind of come together that way. So that's really cool. They're exploring that.
Yeah, I should say it's environmentally more sustainable as well, because things like those trees can actually feed the fish too. They can use the leaves from the trees to feed the fish. So yeah, it does, like you're saying, it kind of works all together in a complementary system.
That's awesome. Thanks, Luke and Kaitlyn. Rebecca and Blaine, let's switch to sort of your work. I want to start with Afghanistan, because it is a country that for Canadians was sort of top of mind in the early 2000s. You know, the war in Afghanistan, we had troops devoted there, and it's sort of a political, you know, hot potato at times. Now, you know, in recent years, we haven't heard so much about Afghanistan. Can you sort of update us on what the situation is there and how MCC is involved?
Sure, yeah. Well, actually, there's currently quite a bit of apathy and frankly, what we call compassion fatigue towards Afghanistan. The US has been conducting a war in Afghanistan for nearly 20 years now. And for part of that time, there were Canadian troops, I think from about 2001 to 2014. And really, many North Americans are just tired of hearing about troops, and they want people to come home. We're also seeing a drop in international aid for Afghanistan, you know, with this compassion fatigue. Afghanistan's political future is very uncertain right now. Elections are seen as illegitimate and full of fraud. Peace talks are happening between the Taliban and the Afghan government. But among people in Afghanistan, there's a lot of hopelessness, especially young Afghanistans. When we go there, when we talk with people who are around 30 years old, they just tell us about all they've seen in their country is war. Their whole life, they've just lived in a war-torn country. The other thing I'd like to highlight about the situation in Afghanistan is the situation of women and girls. According to Amnesty International, I think it's ranked as the worst place in the world to be a woman. 87% of women in Afghanistan are illiterate, and about 80% face forced marriage, many before the age of 16, and about 90% have experienced some type of violence in their home. So given all this, we think it's really important that MCC continue to have a presence there in Afghanistan, continue to work with quality partners. We are supporting work there in mental health, in education, and we do all that, what we like to call through a peace building lens, that we're always integrating peace building into those projects.
Could you, that is kind of distressing to hear, really, because it's one of those things that it sort of just makes me aware of how much the news cycle and how the political atmosphere kind of dictates what we pay attention to internationally. And meanwhile, people are still living and still struggling and still trying to survive and thrive even. Could you tell us a little more about you know, how some of these needs are being met, some of these mental health needs, or some of the challenges that women and girls are facing?
Well, let me first talk about one of our projects, and it's literally called a peace building project. We work with a partner, peace project manager, Tamim, and generally he's about 30 years old, has a young family. He talks about the hopelessness that his generation feels. And really, there are very little signs of hope as you look to the future in Afghanistan. But Tamim, he really is trying to build hope among the younger people. Tamim himself, he remembers, you know, as a young child running away from the Taliban. He actually ended up going to the university in Kabul, and talks about how most of his classmates currently have left Afghanistan. Most of the educated will try to leave Afghanistan. And if they haven't already, they are trying to. Tamim's peace project is really an interesting one. He has this vision of working with Afghanistan's youth to bring the peace to a possible peace, the country to peace. The curriculum, he has written curriculum for high school students with trying to understand just personally, internally, what peace is with themselves, as well as what does it mean to have peace within your family and communities. It's actually a unique project in Afghanistan in that it focuses on the trauma that youth have experienced. One of the things that we understand in Afghanistan, every family has experienced trauma, death, experiences the war in one way or another. So this Tamim says the youth are the future if we have any future in Afghanistan. And so this project that he is working on, where he's written curriculum, is being used in over 19 schools in Kabul and has been taught to over 8,000 students. And from focus groups and that sort of thing, we're testing, they are starting to use nonviolent conflict transformation skills in their daily lives as young people.
And I just want to share a little bit about some of the projects we're doing with women in Afghanistan. And I actually have 2 photos to share from some women's literacy projects that we've been working on. I won't share the names of the women in this photo for security reasons. And I mentioned earlier, the literacy rate in Afghanistan is only 12% for women. That's very low. And we know that literacy changes women's lives. And when that happens, it impacts in a positive way the communities they live in. This MCC partner is called ALEF, Adult Learning and Education Facilitation. They've been teaching hundreds of women literacy and peace building in 3 communities right in Kabul. And in the several years it's been running, ALEF has really seen positive changes in women's lives. Not only are they learning to read, but the majority, I think it's 80%, of women report improved family relationships built on those peace building skills they're learning. And ALEF has found that women are doing things they could have never done before when they learn how to read. Excuse me. They're reading stories to their children before going to bed. They're helping their children with homework. They're writing shopping lists. They're reading shopping signs and doing things just like reading a label on a medicine so that they know what kind of medicine they're giving their children. I was actually able to visit these learning circles when we visited Afghanistan a few years ago. And it was just really personally moving for me to be able to sit with these women and to see their enthusiasm and their eagerness for learning.
Sounds amazing. Yeah, that's such a powerful thing that I often take for granted, literacy. I mean, it's just, my daughter is 5 years old and we're trying to get her into like the words and I can't imagine as a grown-up, I assume that my daughter will learn how to read, and it's if you're in comfortable Canada, in Kitchener, that is a safe assumption, but it's something that we should not take for granted. So thank you for that reminder and the great work that's happening there. I want to switch to India, and we've heard you share about the situations, the sort of the religious tensions happening there and the movement towards this kind of growing sense of nationalism. Could you explain give the context around what that means and what that looks like? And then, an example of an MCC program or work by partners that's kind of addressing that tension.
Sure. So really across Asia, we're seeing this movement towards nationalism, and especially in India, where there's this trend of connecting religion or national identity to your citizenship. So Prime Minister Modi, he's been in power since about 2014 in India, and he has what they call a Hindu nationalist agenda, which really promotes the supremacy of Hindus, and they're about 80% of the population. So in the end, this means that some people count as more Indian than others. And Hindu nationalists have passed some pretty oppressive regulations on Muslims, Christians, and other religious minorities. And now the government has something called a National Register of Citizens, and it requires everyone to prove their citizenship through documentation. And those who aren't able to prove their citizenship are mostly non-Hindu. They could be Muslim, Buddhist, or Christians. And they, in the end, then aren't able to access government programs and may actually be forced to leave India. And we're seeing violence towards these minority religions really erupting across India. In fact, when President Trump visited there about a year ago, riots erupted in Delhi. People attacked mosques and Muslim communities, and unfortunately, many people were killed. So again, this trend that you mentioned, Ken, about rising nationalism and linking that to religion points to how this spark of tension over religion can easily ignite, whether it's in India, whether in Bangladesh, elsewhere in Asia, and really even in North America. And sometimes this tension is below the surface, and sometimes it rises up and sparks.
So how are we addressing this in Asia, or India specifically? I mean, we talk about how Asia programs have significant components of different faiths working together, bringing otherwise people who would normally distance themselves from each other. We are trying to bring them together. With our partners, we work to plan activities to engage people from different religious communities, different ethnic groups, in the hope that through getting to know one another, they can discount the rhetoric and stereotypes and labels that they've heard prior to meeting these different groups. Our partners really facilitate these situations where people meet someone they would not normally meet and help initiate and help those relationships be created. We see this as a way to build strong, peaceful communities. A really good example of this, and there's a picture here of a woman growing eggplants. But a really good example of this in India is our partner, Disha. MCC, along with our partner, work with these struggling communities with food security. Prior to our support of these communities, the villagers talked about only having enough food and income, basically income from rice that they grew for 6 months out of the year. So during the dry seasons, when there was not enough to eat, families as well as communities really struggled to have stability in their community. Adults would need to leave the community for jobs, so they were migrating more to the cities. So you have fathers leaving their families, you have all the men leaving their communities. And also you would have children that didn't have funds to go to school, sort of wandering around the villages, trying to find jobs within this village. And so this context of not having enough food in the village really wreaked havoc on the social fabric of the community and the families. So over the past 10 years, MCC has really supported organizing these villages, 22 villages that we're working with now, to create water collection opportunities by directing water into ponds and creating dams in places where it can collect water during the rainy season. So this water collection has basically created a whole additional growing season for these communities, and has made it possible for these families to stay at home throughout the year. And it has made it possible for them to have enough income that they can send their children to school. So although food security was our main emphasis, throughout all this, one of the best ways that we see breaking down these divisions was having these different people work together for a common good that actually help the community. So our partner that we worked with was a Muslim director, and the staff were Muslims. The partner was working with these different villages. Some were Christian villages, some were Hindu villages. And so by working together, they created this way of connecting with one another. So this partner was working across all these religious and ethnic divides that wouldn't normally be worked across during this environment in India of Hindu nationalism. So despite these differences in religious identification between the organization and the various communities, these communities came together and actually bridged the divide and are now communities that understand one another.
Thank you so much, Rebecca and Blaine, for that great sort of overview of just a snapshot. And really, this whole evening is just a snapshot of just a few of the projects and partners that is doing great work, peace work across Asia. And it's just really interesting to see in concrete and sort of tangible ways what peace work can look like, right? For me, that I'm constantly learning and excited to hear the stories coming out through MCC from our international workers and programs, just all the creative ways in which peace can be nurtured in communities. And we really appreciate the work that you are all doing to continue that that good work. We are kind of like wrapping up sort of the official part of this presentation, but I also encourage you, if you have any questions, to throw them in the chat. I'll be kind of going to those questions shortly. I can start with one question that I have, which is, you know, COVID-19 has been one of these sort of all-encompassing factors that has affected the way the whole world works these days, and I imagine has really affected the way that MCC and the partners do their work. How, and I can just throw this out to any one of you, how has COVID-19 affected your work in the way that you move around in communities?
Maybe we can jump in, yeah.
Sure,
For
yeah.
us, it's made it challenging to show up in a new country. And in terms of like visiting partners, Luke was able to go just a couple weeks ago, but we haven't been able to visit any of the other partners yet, just in terms of gathering together. Luckily in Nepal, we can do a lot of things outside. And so, and there is a law to wear masks outside, a bylaw, I'm not sure. So you do have to wear masks, or you're supposed to wear masks all the time. So that does help limit COVID exposure, but it has made it challenging to kind of really get our roots, I don't know, our feet into what's actually going on the ground here.
Yeah.
And I guess I just want to add that it has definitely impacted our work. I mean, we're seeing, especially in India, this huge migration of population because many of them are day laborers. And when the economy shut down, they didn't have any work and needed to all go back to their home communities. I think that happened in Nepal too, but especially India and Bangladesh. So all these millions of people were coming back to their home villages, but their home villages didn't necessarily want to welcome them back. They didn't have jobs for them. Maybe they were carrying COVID. So some of our partners stepped up to provide them food and water, but also give them livelihood for a reason to stay in their home communities and not have to migrate again. In fact, I do want to highlight that the most recent issue of The Commonplace, if you're familiar with that, has India on the cover and has a whole long article about the various ways that MCC is responding to COVID, including in India.
Thank you. Another question, this is maybe an easy one for you, Luke and Kaitlyn. In Nepal, do urban and rural families have to pay for their children's education? Is it like a fee-based thing, or is it?
Yeah, we could do that. This is a grilling from my mother, I think, actually. So I'll answer the question for her. Yeah, there are two systems. Much as there are in lots of parts of the world, there is a public school system, and that is not fee-based. But then a lot of people will choose, if they have the resources, to send their children to a private school, and with the thought that the quality of the education would be better there. So MCC's work is with the public school system. We're working with public schools in smaller villages and towns. Again, with the hope that this will allow people to stay within those host communities instead of migrating to the cities to go to these private schools that they then also have to pay for.
Right. We have a question about a specific event happening here in India. Someone is curious about any connections with the Indian farmers' protests and the issues related to agrarian justice there. Is that something that is on your radar, or?
It's on our radar. I'm trying to think. I have not heard whether any of our farmers are a part of the protest, whether they've actually traveled to be a part of the protest. But yeah, as you heard from some of what we've said, we work with a lot of very small farmers, and some of them would actually be landless. They're farming other people's land. So it certainly is a issue that would affect a lot of the people that we would be working with, because it affects their income. So, but otherwise, we haven't had direct connection with partners telling us how they're interacting with the protests currently.
Thank you, Rebecca and Blaine. And there's a question here about water. Are there any projects that are happening around kind of clean water projects in either Nepal or other places you guys are working? I think, Rebecca, you're trying to, there you go.
Yeah, we do. We do quite a bit with water. And there's many ways we work with water. One of our projects in India is that we've been working with communities in an area where traditionally they have not had enough water. There's a water resource up high in the mountains, but how are they going to get the water down to the villages? So we've been working with a partner that's working with those communities to bring the water basically down to the villages, but also to do that in a fair and equitable way, right? So as the water comes down, who has access to that water? But we have many stories about how that water access has just changed the community. They can now grow vegetables, they can support themselves, their children can go to school, and also how it has brought the community together. Really, again, this lens of peace building, where as they come together and figure out how to share the water, they're building a stronger community.
Yeah, one of the we call them pivots because of COVID has been to do more water, we call them wash projects, where it's water and sanitation. If you don't have water, you can't wash your hands, right? And so in villages that have lack of water, we're starting to work with partners that are going into villages to try to create opportunities for water, whether it's irrigation, whether it's what I talked about, trying to capture water when you have the monsoons. There's different ways to do that. So although it's a long-term project, you know, sort of building dams or irrigation systems, it is a change that we are sort of moving towards because of COVID.
I'll just tack on one thing from a Nepali perspective. We have a couple of different WASH projects, water sanitation and hygiene projects. One that we're just in process right now is a kind of short-term relief project where we've identified a community that was displaced. They were living on the side of a road, and the government came through and widened the road. So the place that they were living was no longer a place that they could live. So they were relocated to a new place. And this is a partnership with the government and some other funders who've been constructing houses for them. And there was a request from an MCC partner down there, the Brethren in Christ Welfare Society, to provide the water for those new houses. So we're working on doing some well drilling so that those houses have fresh water. Again, like Blaine mentioned, one of the keys here is that hygiene is so important during COVID, and without that fresh water, they can't do hygiene or have clean drinking water.
Thank you. I got one quick question. We have someone from Spain joining us, which is awesome. Thank you, Bianca. She had a question for you, Kaitlyn, about your work in mental health. She just wanted to clarify, is that with MCC partners in Asia, or is that private, or is it, I assume MCC partners, but you can clarify that.
Yeah, it's with MCC staff volunteers. So it's not on the partner level, although I am providing some mental health support. So the partner, Koshish in Nepal, that is a partner level, I suppose. To kind of work alongside them and give some clinical clinical support to the work that they're doing there. But then the actual counseling that I'm doing is for MCCers in Asia. So it'd be that the national staff who are working for MCC and have been working for MCC, or the volunteers who come.
Right. Wow. What a gift that must be for them. That's awesome. One last question I'll ask here, and this is sort of kind of comes back to Kaitlyn. Well, I guess all of you, your motivations, but the question of opportunities for service. Are there any opportunities for service that you guys know of in your respective areas for people who may be inspired by what you're doing and the way that you're living out your values? If you have any of those, you can share those.
Yes, and we always like to talk about that. So we've been talking a lot about India, and the MCC India rep position will be opening up later this year at the end of the year. And that position has just been posted on the MCC website. We also have a service worker position in Bangladesh, planning, monitoring, evaluation, and reporting on our projects. So those are two that are currently open. We're looking for people, the leadership positions to have some international experience, management experience, but most importantly, we call it a learning posture in MCC, to be willing to continue to learn, to listen as you come into a new country and culture, to learn about the issues there and to walk alongside people. I should say, and our position is open too, but not for another year. But anyways, those are three positions. And we encourage anyone on this call to apply or to tell your friends and neighbors and church community.
Thank you. So we'll wrap this up shortly. This is miraculous, but we're on time, and we're mindful as well that, I don't know if you guys, I guess you're just going to get right into your workday. You've got a whole workday ahead of you still. Oh my goodness. My colleague Darlene Bartha, who many of you will know through donor relations, will close in prayer, and then I'll just add a little thing at the end about if you want to support specifically the work that Kaitlyn, Luke, and Rebecca and Blaine are doing in Asia. We'll add a little information about that as well. So Darlene, if you're ready, we could close this off in prayer.
Sure, thanks, Ken. Thank you all. Thank you all so much as well for coming out. Let's pray. God, you are our refuge and strength and ever-present help in times of trouble. And we pray that you would strengthen the work of the hands of the Jantzis and Rebecca and Blaine and the staff, the other staff and workers there. So grateful for their passion and their dedication, and may you continue to give them wisdom as they work with our partners and participants. And this window that we have just received into these countries and cultures and needs and communities. May it help to adjust our mindsets and our worldviews and move us toward more just and mercy-oriented living. And God, we pray that you would bring peace where there is conflict. We know and hear lots of Afghanistan and conflict all over, and just bring understanding among the various faith divisions, and bring opportunity where there is oppression, especially for these women that we were hearing about, and bring resilience to those who feel they are at the end of their rope. So lead us into hope and peace for our lives, our land, our world, and in Christ's love we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Darlene. And thank you all again for coming. Thank you especially to Luke and Kaitlyn. Leo is up awake. He's up for breakfast now. Rebecca and Blaine, yeah, thank you all for coming, for joining and sharing of your work, and starting your day so early for us. And again, thank you all for joining us. We hope you've been inspired and learned more about the good work happening with MCC and our partners in Asia. If you are interested in supporting the work of MCC there, you can go to mcco.ca/donate, and there's also a way in which you can sort of specify, you can give to where needed most, or you can indicate a specific country or where you'd like to support. So, and again, a huge thank you for so many of you who I know are already supporting MCC's work. So thank you. Lots of thank yous, and have a great evening for most of us, and have a great long rest of your day for our friends in Asia there. So good night, be well.